Hey, my name is Briz, and I'm a new media artist slash educator slash organizer living and working in Chicago, Illinois. And this is an FAQ video for a series that I released a couple years ago called the Glitch Codec tutorial, which was based on a theoretical and technical workshop I started giving in 2010 on hacking video codecs from a political glitch perspective, which itself was based on a body of work and practice I had been developing since 2007, which these days is generally known as glitch art. And speaking of these days, lots more has been added to the glitch art conversation in the realm of tutorials since I put out the glitch codec, so I also want to mention those in this video. So here we go, frequently asked questions. I've gotten lots and lots of pings through various social media regarding this series. Some folks send their gratitude, other folks send me really rad work that they've made using the tutorial, but mostly I get technical questions. And while some of these questions are unique, there are a few questions that I get over and over and over and over. And while I love answering questions sincerely, I'm pretty sure I've answered every question I've ever gotten, it does take a lot, which is why I'm making this FAQ. Okay, so first question, and this is probably the question that I get the most, which is some variation on I glitched my image but it won't open. So this corresponds to the first video in my series where I define glitch art through the practice of corrupting a JPEG image in TextEdit. The glitch art community calls this process databending. And there are lots of variations on this. The first I came across was detailed in a tutorial called Databending, a Glitch Art Primer by Benjamin Berg, better known as stAllio, where he uses WordPad on a Windows machine. But in the time since having posted the Glitch Codec tutorial, there's been a ton more tutorials released on databending, using different editors on different platforms. Each of these are a variation on the next, adding new perspective to the whole conversation. And for the true glitch connoisseur, I really think it's worth checking all of these and all the other databending tutorials out. But for folks who can't seem to get their shit glitching and don't have time to watch all these super rad videos, here's a few key tips. Number 1, avoid the header of the image. The first few lines of your image file is called the header and contains information about the image rather than the pixels that make up the image itself. Screwing with the header can screw things up in ways that look like this instead of looking like this. Number 2, try different image file formats. All these images look the same, but they're actually different file formats. One's a JPEG, one's a PNG, and one's a GIF, which means they're all going to glitch differently when you bend them. A couple of really great resources to check out here is a Vernacular of File Formats by Rosa Menkman and Evan Meaney's To Hold a Future Body So Close to One's Own. Both are compression studies which catalog type by type how different formats glitch. Rosa's is predominantly image-based while Evan's is exclusively videos. Which leads me to number 3, try a hex editor. So you can open up pretty much any type of file in a standard text editor like Notepad on Windows, or TextEdit on Mac, or gedit on Ubuntu. But when you try to glitch videos or music files or other larger files, sometimes text editors don't work so well. Instead, you should download a hex editor like 010 Editor or HexFiend. So this will give you direct access to the binary data instead of the ASCII gobbledygook you get in a text editor. So in the instance of trying to glitch a video file, for example, a hex editor tends to work better. Okay, so the next question I get a lot is, does this work on Windows? So there's technically 2 answers to this question. The tutorial starts with data bending an image in a text editor. It's a kind of glitch art 101, and then it gets into the more intermediate process of hacking codecs. The first part, the data bending glitch art 101, works on anything. The tools might change with the platform, but the core principles remain the same. And for more details on that, I recommend checking out the other video tutorials I referenced in the first part. As for the hacking codec part, this is platform specific, and I talk about this in detail in part 3 of the glitch codec tutorial. So this doesn't mean you can't use your own computer, because part of the process of the glitch codec tutorial is downloading an ISO file that you can run on your computer, and this usually runs on any computer. And this ISO file is a major part of the glitch codec tutorial. It's an exact copy of my Linux desktop from the time that I made it. You burn that file onto a disk, and then when you reboot your computer, instead of logging into your desktop, you log into my desktop. Or rather, a copy of my desktop from 2010. And again, this generally runs on any computer. Okay, the next question I've only gotten a few times, but it's really important, and it has to do with the difference between running the disk live and installing the ISO. I devote the entire 4th video in the series to this exact point, and it's important to listen to that video step by step. What I recommend is that you run my desktop live from the CD, which means you don't install anything on your computer. If you want to install it, you have that option, but keep in mind you can overwrite everything on your computer if you do this. You should look into how to install Ubuntu side by side with your current system if that's something you're interested in doing. But when you run the CD, if you type in install and then click next, 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 next a whole bunch of times, you will override everything on your computer. So don't do that unless that's your intention. Again, watch part 4 pretty closely and make sure that you run the disk live rather than installing it. Okay, so another common question is, can you run this live from a USB instead of a DVD or a CD? The answer is probably yes. I also don't have a CD drive on my current laptop anymore, but I did back in 2010. Times have changed. So I myself have never run off a USB stick, but I know that's possible and I know other folks have done that. So I would do a search for running ISO live from USB on Ubuntu. And you'll come across a couple tutorials that go through how to do that step by step. Okay, so the next question, and this is a pretty common issue, is when folks try to boot into the live disk, but then it gets stuck on that black screen with the white Ubuntu logo. They can't seem to get past that step and into the desktop when you log in. This happens every once in a while, and I recommend the following troubleshooting steps in this order. 1. Restart your computer, maybe a few times. 2. If that doesn't work, try burning it onto a new DVD or CD. 3. If that doesn't work, try booting from a USB instead, like I explained in the last question. 4. If none of that stuff works, try using your DVD or USB on another computer if you have access to another computer. For some strange reason, some computers just refuse to boot this ISO. I've documented specs from a few of those cases to try to narrow down why it works on some computers and why it doesn't seem to work on others, but I haven't quite figured that out yet. So worst comes to worst, you should just try to find another computer to run it on if you can, and that usually solves the problem. Another question I get every once in a while is from folks that already know Linux and rather just use their system instead of running my ISO. This is something that you can do but requires some prep work. So if you are a Linux whiz, there are a few preliminary steps you're going to have to go through, which I don't mention in the tutorial, in order to get to the same starting point that the tutorial begins on. I've got some raw screen recordings, which I did way back when to watch me set up the ISO. Again, these are raw screen recordings and there's no audio in this. But if you're a Linux user, you'll be able to follow along. And then the last question has to do with folks that are having trouble trying to save their experiments onto external media. So this is another thing I haven't quite figured out yet. On the 6th video, which is the last step of the tutorial, I remind you that because you're running this desktop live off a CD or a USB, anything you do won't be saved. So when you restart your computer, you're going to lose all of your experiments and sort of start off from a clean slate. So what I recommend is to save anything you've done onto external media before you restart your computer. Now for some reason, some folks can't seem to save their experiments onto external media like a USB stick or a hard drive. I'm not quite sure why that is. If anybody has any idea why that might be an issue, maybe you could mention that in the comments and sort of help us out. Which reminds me, the comments are a great section for questions and thought sharing in general. So if you've watched this whole video and you still have some unanswered questions, leave a question in the comments. This is much better than sending me an email or reaching out through other social media, because A, there's a character limitation, so that forces you to be clear and concise with your questions. And B, because it's public, which means other people can benefit from your question, and other people might even answer your question before I do. So if you do have a question that hasn't been answered in this FAQ, then just leave it in the comments. So one more thing before you go. For the last few years, I've been co-organizing this Glitch Art Festival conference gathering event with a whole bunch of other folks and the larger Glitch Art community. And back in 2010, we put together this Glitch Art resource wiki, which is still active today, and has a bunch of great stuff, including more tutorials. So if you've got broader questions about how to do other stuff beyond the scope of the Glitch Codec tutorial, I highly recommend you check that out. There's a really cool tutorial on databending with Audacity by Antonio Roberts, aka Hello Cat Food. There's even tutorials on bending hardware devices by the Dutch masters Gijs Hieskes and Karl Klamp and other folks. And you'll even find some meta glitch tools / tutorials by Pox Party, like the Satramizer and the Satramizer Online, which I most definitely recommend checking out. Okay, so that's it. If you've got any other questions, leave them in the comments. Again, I highly recommend checking out some of those other tutorials. Lots of great perspectives and thoughts on the glitch art conversation. And that's what glitch art is, after all, a conversation.